Hello and welcome to Carnivorist Chats. My name is James, your host. I started this podcast to help other folks share their own healing stories and to interview thought leaders and experts in the carnivore, keto, and low oxalate space. Before we begin, I'd like to give a shout out to Equip Foods and the Carnivore Bar. As an affiliate, you can use the link in the show notes to get a discount on their products when you check out using the code Carnivorist. Thanks in advance for listening, subscribing, and any likes or shares. And now, on with the podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Carnivorist Chats. It's James, your host. I'm really excited about today's guest. We connected on Twitter, now known as X, of course, and Robyn is now also on Instagram. She has an amazing story to share, folks, specifically one, and I'm excited to talk about it. It has to do with mental healing and bipolar disorder. We're going to get into her dietary choices from when she was young to where she is now, how she did this, and her incredible weight loss journey to boot. Robyn Dobbins, welcome to Carnivorist Chats.
Hello, James. It's so great to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. And actually, I don't know if you remember this, but we did meet in person at KetoCon.
Oh my goodness, we did, Robyn.
It was very brief, but
it was super brief. And please excuse me, I had totally forgotten about that part. So awesome to have seen you there. And what a great event that was, because I got to connect with so many people. It was a whirlwind weekend, and I'm not sure about you, and we can talk a little bit about this later, but are you planning to go to Hack Your Health next year?
No, unfortunately, it's just not a good weekend. It's the very last week of school for my kiddo, so I won't be able to drop everything. She will need my assistance. So this one I'll miss, but I did go to two in a row, and they are great fun, and it is a great way to connect. And that it's honestly, this is the first time I had heard of you. We had that breakout session with Dr. Barry, and you stood up and told your story. And I was like immediately on my phone following you. I was like, this is an amazing story. I need to follow this guy. So and now here we are. So that's pretty awesome.
Thank you for that. Yeah, that little where Dr. Barry, when he asked if there were any vegans in the audience, and I put up my hand and he started asking me questions. That was a pretty impactful and full circle moment for me, because I had followed so much of his information on my way back to health. Robyn, let's dive right in, because I know the listeners will be intrigued and really wondering about your story. I wonder if you could start at the beginning, as I always say, a great place to start. Your formative years, younger, and what you had noticed growing up and how you came to where you are now. This is going to be fascinating for many people.
Well, I hope it is, but I'm going to be honest with you. I have some problems because, as we'll get into, I have mental health issues. I've been diagnosed as bipolar, and I've had severe depression. And one of the symptoms of that is that you have some memory loss. So it's very hard for me to, in fact, this is a project that I've been working on for myself for just started this month, is I'm trying to just write. Just let whatever it is come out and see what happens, because there's so many times that I start to try to think about my past and I can't remember. It's troubling. So, but I will do the best I can with that little caveat that I don't remember very specific events. But I feel like my childhood was pretty typical. I did grow up in a single parent home, so it was me, myself, and my sister, and my mother in the home. My dad moved out. I think I was in second or third grade when that happened. So I really don't remember a time with my dad in the home. However, he was around. We saw him. I don't remember a time with him in the home. So there were struggles in that, because my mom didn't work, and so she all of a sudden had to get a job, and we had to learn about taking care of ourselves. And my sister's 3 years older than me, so there was a lot of times where it was just the two of us, because neither of our parents were home. And I say that's typical because everybody in my age group was going through the same thing. Everybody, their parents were divorced, and that's just kind of what everybody was doing. When, as far as eating is concerned, I actually feel like we did fairly well. My mom would cook us breakfast. We would eat eggs for breakfast if we wanted them, but we were also like huge into oatmeal. So instant oatmeal would cross our plates. And then as time went on, it started moving towards more like we'd have the toaster strudels. Gotta love a toaster strudel. And just pop that in the toaster and run out the door, and you get the little icing packets. Delicious. So our breakfast kind of evolved over time, and that was notable. I know, like when I was in high school, I was eating cinnamon rolls or pecan rolls, like a whole, like they come in like a 6-pack. That's what I'd eat, 6 of those, and then off to school I went. So I know over time that definitely evolved into what was quick, easy, and delicious. Sweet as in delicious. And but my mom cooked dinners. We packed our own lunches. We, sandwiches and snack cakes and that kind of thing. So, which is fairly normal food for the youth of the 80s and 90s. That's what we did. And actually, I do feel like if I look back on it, or if I talk to my husband about how he ate, it's wildly different. We did still eat home cooked meals a lot. We did still eat a lot of meat. My mom's Polish and my dad's Italian, so we had a nice little mix of both cultures still, because our families were, they remembered their grandparents that had immigrated, so we still had cultural food within our diet that we ate. So I think that was a benefit to us, that we still remember. That is probably what made switching over and having to actually start cooking to myself when I did change how I ate easier, because I do remember someone in my house cooking. And I think that a lot of people don't remember that. And so they have to start completely fresh. So honestly, I would say that was an advantage.
One other question I had for you about those sort of formative years was, you had mentioned on a prior podcast that you're always into fitness. And folks, let me just tell you now, Robyn, if you follow her on Twitter or X and Instagram, and you see this lady clean and jerk these weights, I am super impressed of the form that she's putting in the gym. But you had always been interested in fitness, so never really thought of yourself as unhealthy back in the day, did you?
No, I never did. As a child, I played softball, so I was big into playing softball. Didn't play for my high school, but I was always on a rec team. I was a catcher. I'm tiny. If you remember, I am not a big person. I was a catcher, so I'm behind the plate, and I was getting. It was fast pitch. They were stealing on me, and I was throwing the ball, or I was getting in front and blocking them. And so I was always pretty physically active. When I went off to college, we didn't have a softball team. We did play a little rec ball, but when I went off to college, I still it was in the mountains, so I did a lot of hiking and that sort of thing. It wasn't until I became a lazy adult that kind of stopped for a little while. I always thought of myself as active, but I do recall my husband and I had gone on a vacation with some friends, and we went for a hike, and I was really sick then too, so that doesn't help anything. But I thought we got like halfway up to the top of this not very big mountain, but halfway up, and I was like, is there any other way to get up here? And we stopped and went back down, and we never made it to the top. So, and I never clicked at that time that, I'm carrying all the extra weight up this hill that up this mountain that I didn't know I was carrying. Even though I'm like holding a water bottle, it's not like it's a strenuous mountain it's not like we're backpacking or anything like that. But I got halfway up, and I was like, I have to go back down. There's no way I'm making this trip. I'm exhausted. So these little things pop up, and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that used to be me. But that's that's how it is.
Robyn, what was the first sort of signs to you? I know you mentioned as a young woman that you started to have negative thoughts towards yourself, but you hid it when you were younger. Let the listeners know how that started to come about for you when you first noticed that, if you would.
I think my first noticing of it was definitely in high school. Like I said, my sister's 3 years older than me, so she was a senior when I was a freshman, and I think I'm very thankful for that, because for whatever reason, I do have a very strong personality. I'm aware of that, but for whatever reason, one day, high school girls being high school girls, they all decided they didn't like me anymore, and so I was alone. Sorry, I get emotional. I've got my box of tissues here. So I was alone, and I was alone a lot. And thankfully my sister noticed, because that's when the thoughts really started popping up. Like, I don't need to be here. I can nobody wants me, nobody needs me. I have no value. What's the point? So that's when I started like kind of visualizing my non-existence, and how that I could make that happen. Somehow, some way, I was able to fight that. And I think that's kind of the biggest thing within having some sort of mental issue, depression, is that it's a fight and it's very exhausting. And some people, they win the fight because they're still here, but it's still a constant fight. So it's a very small win. And some people, their fight just goes in a different direction, and the dark thoughts, they win out. So thankfully, somehow, because my sister took me in and allowed me to just kind of tag along to all of the events that she was doing with her friends, I didn't go deeper at that time. Of course, she graduates, and I have to basically relearn how to make friends. I'm around people that I've been with my whole life. I'm around people I went to elementary school with, and I still have to figure out how to navigate new friendships, plus feel the way I feel, plus fight this battle and not let anybody know that I was feeling that way. If you read my high school yearbook, the comments are, "You're so happy. I love being around you. These are, they're so great and so fun and all this." And it's an act, and it's an exhausting act.
Thank you for sharing, Robyn. And please, we share tears freely here on Carnivorous Chats. If anyone, and we were discussing my episode with Brett Lloyd prior, where he had a box of tissues and was virtually handing it to me. I was in tears. He was in tears. I cried on Valerie's episode when she shared her healing journey. So
Yeah.
please feel free, and thank you again for sharing. You had also mentioned that, and which I thought was really not only interesting but profound, that you used to get in a lot of arguments and write everything down, and that was a sign to you of what was potentially happening to you. And describe that process a little bit, if you would, Robyn. It was just more of a detailed, like you just had to get it out on paper. What do you think that was the reasoning?
No, actually, it's I don't know if it's getting it out of paper or if it may even be considered worse than that. I would get so angry that I could not speak. I was physically unable to make words come out of my mouth. So I was having arguments with the first time I recall it happening was my boyfriend in college. We got in an argument, and I don't even know what it was about. It doesn't matter. It was just the first time that I remember that I couldn't speak, and he was talking and I was writing, and he would read what I would write and speak back, and I would write again, because I just had no ability to speak. It's a very strange feeling, but it has happened several times. And now it happened a couple times with my husband, right after my son was born. And that's really when he was able to recognize that there was a problem. So we had gotten an argument, financial, of course. That's what most arguments I think are in a marriage, but something financial was going on. We have a newborn baby. I'm just crying and I can't speak, and I start writing to him. Well, I have a notebook that I guess he was unaware of, but also what I had been writing in there, because things have been going on for quite some time. I was writing to myself, and I was saying, I don't want to be here anymore. I don't want to do this anymore. I just don't want to be here. And I would write those notes all over the place. I was writing them in that. I was writing them, like, if I found a piece of scrap paper, I was writing it on that. It was, that was, what a mantra. I don't want to be here anymore. And that's where, that's where he noticed that there was a problem. So because we have a newborn child, he takes me to the hospital emergency room, assuming that I have postpartum depression, with really no idea that this is not new for me. I've been going through this for a long time. So my diagnosis initially was postpartum depression. I was in the hospital and just observed. They released me that day because someone who was very suicidal came in. I think they probably would have kept me and observed me and him for longer had that not happened. But I was just put on medication and sent on my way.
I was actually going to ask you about that, because of what you had written down. Had there been any thoughts, because, Brett was concerned about being institutionalized because of his manic depression and being locked up, because he had actually worked in places where that happened. So with you, they didn't do that, even though you had been writing it down. Wow. Again, very powerful testimony, Robyn.
Yeah, right. Like, I go back and look at it, I was like, that was a really dark dark time. And, I'm basically screaming for help, only on paper. And the only help that, my husband thankfully was helpful, but the only help the medical community gave me was a bottle of pills. There wasn't even like, you need to go see a counselor or anything like that. It was just, here's your bottle of pills. You have postpartum depression. Take your pills. You'll be fine.
The old diagnose and adios, as I like to call it. Oh, I know that well. You have said prior on podcasts that I listened to that you spent, tying into what you just said, that you spent your kids' formative years in a corner asleep and medicated. And we're just started to get into that medicated side. From understanding your journey, I learned that you basically, after this initial episode here, and using your words, powered through the next 5 years. That must have been extremely difficult for you. I can only imagine. And what was the next stage after this, Robyn?
So after the postpartum diagnosis, I just diligently took my medicine and thought that everything was going to be okay. I ended up 2.5 years later pregnant again, and I told the doctor, I don't think it would be a good thing for me to be on this medication while I'm pregnant. So they took me off the medication, and it just got dark. It just so happens, like, worldly things happen too, right? So we had moved from where we lived. We had moved somewhere, had moved to Pennsylvania where my daughter was born, but we didn't meet anybody. My husband literally would leave for work on Sunday night and return home on Saturday morning. So because he traveled, and that's just how it was. He would get in his car and he'd be gone. I have a toddler. I'm pregnant. I don't know anyone. I suddenly live in the mountains and can't walk anywhere. And really the only thing that ever brings me joy is going for a walk. So when we moved there and I'm kind of like trapped in the house, that was a really wildly different situation than what I was used to. So when I went to the doctor and asked to get off the medication, they obliged, but I didn't realize how bad it was. So I actually went back while I was still pregnant and said, I'm not winning this. I need to be put back on. So I did continue with the medication as kind of the buffer for between just totally off the deep end and, what normal was for us. And it was hard because, for me, I'm thinking, what am I doing to this baby that I'm growing? What is this child getting? Is this the right thing? So, like, then all these, like, you just keep compounding these like little arguments, like, am I doing the right thing? Am I not doing the right thing? I wish it wasn't this way, but it is this way. And so it's terribly exhausting to be inside this head when all of this is going on. And of course, I'm basically acting as a single parent to a toddler. So I have to be aware. But those were really dark times. I really have concern for how, especially my son, the oldest, grew up, because I was angry. If he wouldn't take a nap, I would just be like screaming at him to take a nap and just basically locking him in his room and being like, I can't deal with you right now. I have to have a break from this. I just can't. And so it's his formative years, and his mother, who's supposed to be giving him his unconditional love and teaching him everything he knows about the world, because we spend every waking moment together, is just so upset all the time. She can't control her emotions. And that persisted and continued even after my daughter was born, for years, this constant battle inside my head, this constant anger that was really mostly directed to my children. Because Matt, my husband, he's like, I get to travel for work, so I don't have to deal with this. So it was really, really, really exhausting is the best word. We did end up moving again, even further away from any support that we had. And that's when I had to change doctors. That's when I stopped taking medication, because it just, I don't know the details, but somehow that just didn't transfer over when we moved. I had stopped taking medication. So I was probably 6 years maybe without medication, trying to fight not having a support system close to me. So like when everybody else is like, yeah, we went out on a date night because my parents watched the kids, we didn't have that option. So we didn't have date nights, we didn't have time away. If we did anything, it was all of us, or we divided and conquered. It was never, so there was just never a break for all of those years of just constantly fighting my own brain, screaming at children, until I decided that something is definitely wrong, and I need to start researching what's wrong and figure that out.
So at what stage, and I had imagined this was the stage, you had just talked about you were doing some research as to what was going on. How did this bipolar diagnosis come to fruition?
Well, one of our favorite things to do with the kids was to take them to the library. So I just started checking out books. I just started reading. And I read a bunch of books and memoirs and those types of things of different people who had different mental health issues. And the ones that resonated the most with me were the ones of people who had bipolar disorder. And I was like, this really sounds like me. And I need to get this checked out. Like, there's something that I can do. I don't have to live like this. Let me go get diagnosed. To me, having a diagnosis, and then that would mean there was a plan that was going to change everything. So I went to my general practitioner and I was telling him what was going on and how angry I was. And, like I was constantly fighting, always fighting the desire to just get in my car and leave. Just, I don't need this life anymore. I can make something new happen. And just these kinds of things were just always going on. And he agreed it didn't sound like I was well. And then, of course, he gives me medication. He says, but then he says, you're going to go see a psychiatrist. He sets that up for me because he's the general practitioner. So I leave with a new doctor to go see and a new bottle of pills to start taking. And this then starts this whole entire journey of me seeing doctors and being medicated. So where we lived in South Carolina, there's a medical system there, but the psychiatric system is just really not well developed. So my first doctor was about 45 minutes away. So again, we consider I don't have a support system. My husband travels for work, so he has to take off work to take me, or he has to stay with the kids. At that point, they were both in school. My daughter was in school half day at the time. So we have to schedule everything around all of this. It's very hectic, very crazy. And I go to a doctor, I go to the psychiatrist, I fill out a questionnaire. I sit with her for 10, 15 minutes while she basically reads my questionnaire. And then she gives me additional medications. She doesn't take me off the one that the GP prescribed, but she gives me additional. And then I'm just to see her in 2 months. And this continues until, and this was like every time I saw her, we were adjusting the doses of the medications, and we would add, this one's not working, let's taper back on this one, this one's now working. And so it's this, like, I'm constantly trying a different cocktail of medication. And let's go back and remember, this is all based on a questionnaire. We don't really talk about me, we don't talk about my life, we don't talk about what's going on. She's reading this questionnaire, the way I'm answering the questions. Okay, she needs more happy over here and she needs a little more dull over here. Let's make the brain do those things with these medications. Then, of course, like I said, the system wasn't very good. She closes her office. She's just gone one day. She's just not there anymore, right? So I have to go back to my GP. I'm like, I don't know what to do. The office closed. I'm on all these medications. She's helping me. And listen, I'm singing from the mountaintops at this point because I'm like, I have a diagnosis. My diagnosis is bipolar, depression, leaning heavy with depression, and OC. I had all three as my diagnoses. And I'm like, yay, I have a diagnosis and now I can get a treatment plan and everything's going to be better because the medicine's just going to make all of this suffering that I've had for 10, 15 years just go away. It's all going to be different from this point forward. And then she's gone. So this then starts a journey. I think total, I saw 4 different doctors. And really interesting about this is that it started to become a pattern. I would go to a new doctor. They would have the little card like in the waiting room, the blah, blah, blah drug. It's the drug of the future, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I'm going home with that drug. And I would. And then that one closed and I would go to another one. And these are getting further and further away from home. It is a huge hassle just to get to these appointments for our family, which is a burden. And the worst thing in the world for this depressed brain is to be a burden to my family. Also, these drugs are name brand, brand new. There was one that was like $600 a month. I don't work. My husband's the sole breadwinner for a family of 4. We have financial struggles, and I don't want to be a burden because that makes me feel like a horrible person to be a burden. So now I'm having to spend money that we don't have to be healthy for my family, to be able to be successful with my family. And if I look back on it, were these really expensive drugs doing anything? And the answer is no. I was basically being sedated for my children's, like I said, my children's formative years. These are the times where I should be sitting on the floor and playing with them or running around outside or pushing them on the swings, all of this stuff. And I'm just kind of propped up in a chair and they have areas that they can play and I'm in the room, but I'm not involved. I'm not part of anything. And we could go somewhere as a family. I could be there, but I couldn't be there. I wasn't present. And that's what these medications did. And that's, I'm assuming, what the doctors know they do. Nobody's claiming that when you take these antidepressants and antipsychotics that they make you happy. Nobody's claiming that happens. All it does is take away. It just makes you so just you're just one step above awake is really all it is. And when my kids went to school, I would set an alarm and get them to school, go home and go right back to bed. I had to have an alarm to wake me up to get them from school or pick them up from the school bus. And if I didn't wake up, then mommy wasn't there. And that's just how life was. That's how if the just one step. And as soon as I take the medicine at night, out, I was asleep. I was done.
Robyn, I think I know the answer to this, but at any stage during this, what we've talked about thus far, had any of these physicians ever asked you what you ate or were putting in your mouth?
Yes, I believe you know the answer, and that answer is no, not a soul, because the medicine is what's going to do the job. Obviously, I was born with a medication deficient syndrome that made my brain not work properly, so I had to take the medicine so that my brain could work properly, and it didn't work. So what we consider, treatment resistant is really just my state of sedation wasn't enough to keep me from feeling sad all the time.
This all started to change when you turned 40 and you had some blood tests. And I'll let you tell the listeners what happened next.
Yeah. So just like a good person that I am, I'm like, I need to have a yearly doctor's appointment. And this is the big one. I'm turning 40. The doctor's like, you're turning 40. We're going to do all these blood tests. So we do. And of course, the first thing that comes up is that my cholesterol is no good. Your cholesterol is bad. So we need to put you on a statin. But let me back up a half a second, because my husband has always had weight problems. Even as a child, he was always overweight. So he was always doing the diet train, always trying to figure out things. And somewhere along the way, he heard Vinnie Totorich on a podcast. So he already had been listening to Vinnie, and he had tried to do what Vinnie was doing, but I was not on board because I was all about my pasta. So he ended up not sticking with it, but he was still listening to the podcast. When the doctor told me that he needed to put me on a statin, I thought 2 things. One, I'm only 40 years old, and this thing is a forever drug, and I do not want to add another drug. I'm already on a cocktail for my brain. I don't want to add another drug. And two, pretty sure Matt said that Vinnie guy said something about if you change your diet, you can lower your cholesterol. So maybe I should try that. Thankfully, he had that moment, because if not, I'd be on a statin and I'd probably be twice as big as I was then, and still heavily medicated, still sedated, still just not living life, just alive, but not living. And so I asked my doctor and I said, if I change my diet for 6 months and stay off the statins, will I die? And he said, no, I don't think you'll die. I said, well, then can I try that? And he said, yeah. This is just a regular standard doctor. He's in a medical system. The hospital's directly across the street. Like, he is in the system, this doctor. And he said yes, which is amazing in and of itself, because usually that's not the answer. So thankfully I had that doctor. Thankfully Matt had been listening to Vinnie. Thankfully these things all came together. And so that's when I went in. I said, this is what I'm doing. I'm doing NSNG, which is no sugars, no grains. This is Vinnie's big thing, and which is what he has the trademark on, and does his podcast all about. And it's been it's just been phenomenal. 6 months later, I went back to that same doctor. We ran the blood tests, and all of the bad things were gone. So I said, do I need to be on this statin? He said no. And he said, just continue doing whatever it is that you're doing. And I was like, cool, I can do that. But eating no sugar, eating no grain, and not eating seed oil changed all of that within 6 months.
Wow. And thank goodness for that general practitioner. Thank goodness for him that he said that you should be able to not take the statin and see some results, because not every physician would do that. They are prescribed like candy now. It's absolutely crazy. So Robyn, you then embarked on NSNG. You also have lost now 50 pounds.
Yes.
And
yes,
we were talking.
I was blissfully unaware that I was overweight, but yes, I lost within 9 months of being NSNG. I had lost 50 pounds.
Had you incorporated exercise back into your regimen at this time?
Yes and no, not really. What would happen is my way of resolving having a craving for something would be to just leave, and I would go for walks. So that's when my dog Daisy and I started going for walks. I had to teach her how to walk on a leash. She had never done it before. I'd eat dinner, and it'd be like, it's dessert time. Nope, I'm going to go for a walk. And I would go for walks. So the walks would get longer and longer and longer as I was getting more energy, because all of a sudden I had all this energy. So, transitioning off of a high carb diet, let me tell you, I ate cereal. Golden Grams are my favorite. I ate Hot Pocket, lots and lots of Hot Pockets. And I didn't cook dinner, but we did a lot of like hamburger helper kind of stuff. So going from these foods that I was eating to vegetables and meat was quite a transition. I always ended every single night with a massive bowl of ice cream. I no longer had that option because I wasn't eating sugar. So I had to learn how to eat yogurt. I don't like yogurt. That's gross. I want ice cream. So, my transition food from having nightly ice cream was to have a bowl of yogurt with berries at night. And so, I'm eating yogurt. I'm eating berries, and I'm eating vegetables. I ate a lot of Brussels sprouts and a lot of broccoli at the time. All of it cooked with bacon, because it's all delicious with bacon, and meat. A lot of meat. So I would make stews and roasts and steaks and chicken. And so that's as you transition off of all of those sweet foods, your brain starts going, whoa, we want the sweet foods. So my exercise routine was go for a walk. I just rediverted all that energy into that. It wasn't perfect, not at all in the beginning, but enough that I was able to be successful with my one goal, which was to not get put on a statin.
Really incredible. And as I say to folks all the time, the journey of a million miles begins with one step. It really does. And that was your big step. And I'm so proud of you, Robyn, that you took it. You took it. And as we'll find out, you ran with it. And all puns intended. Robyn, you describe, and I'd like to really get into now how you started to realize that this diet not only could affect your physical with the weight loss, but also your mental state and eventually coming off the medications. You described it so aptly when I was listening to you as color came back into your world.
Right. So I started NSNG in 2017. In that year, within that next calendar year, my husband got laid off from his job, and he could not find work where we were living in South Carolina. So he's originally from Texas, and I was just like, this is my big idea. I'm like, hey, you want to move back to Texas? Let's go. Let's see if you can find a job there, and let's go. So he found a job. He left. The kids were still in school. He left and went to Texas and did his job. And I was doing all of the momming that I needed to do, as taking the kids to the things that they needed to go to, keeping the house, having the house ready to show because it was on the market. Just all of these things, packing. I didn't do all the packing, but I did a lot of packing. All of this stuff was happening. And I was looking forward to this big move where we get to go do new things and explore a new area. And my kids would have different opportunities because we're going to the city now. And that was when I started being like, I'm handling all of this pretty well. We made the move, and that's a scary thing. So I'm even further away from support that I had. I'm from Maryland, so all of Pennsylvania was okay. South Carolina's all right. Now I'm in Texas. It's even further away, and I'm joyful about it. Sad that I'm leaving what I know, but joyful about an opportunity that's in front of me, and an opportunity that's in front of all of us to do this move. And that's when I start realizing it's like, you know what? I'm watching the sunrises. Or the way our apartment was when we first moved there, you could see the sunrise. And I'm waking up in the morning before the sun comes up just to watch the sunrise. And I have to take the dog for a walk now. I'm required to because we're in an apartment. So I'm timing it perfectly so that when I'm on the other side of the apartment building, I'm watching the sunset. And I just stand there and I watch the sunset, and I watch the clouds change to all the beautiful colors that they change into. And then I walk back, and it's like, gosh, where was this? This has been missing. Like I remember I grew up on the eastern shore of Maryland. So I remember standing on beaches and watching a sunrise or a sunset and just soaking all of that in, but it got lost somewhere along the way. I just lost all of that. Everything just became just gray is the only way to describe it. Everything was just gray. There was no ups, no downs, just blah. And that's how it was. And I started seeing all of that again. I'm still medicated, and I'm 50 pounds lighter. So I'm on a dose of medication for a 50-pound heavier person. So I'm very medicated. Like I said, when I would take the medicine, it would knock me out. I would be asleep within 30 minutes. And sleep is really not the right way to describe that. There was just nothing. There's no brain. I'm just passed out. I had had several situations where I had to take the medicine, but I was not near my bed, where people had to escort me to my bed. I used to be big into scouting. So I was at a scout camp and I had to take the medicine because I have to take it. If I don't take it at this time, I won't wake up in the morning. And they had to basically drag me to my tent and shove me in there and let me sleep for the night. So that's when I was like, you know what? I feel good. I feel better. I might talk to my new doctor here in Texas about getting off these medications. This is wild. This is crazy. I don't know if it's even possible, because for all intents and purposes, mental health medications are forever. And that's what I always thought. Like, I've got this diagnosis. I'm a sick person. Life just doesn't work for me without medication, but this is something I'm going to try. So, and this was a process. This was not me by myself. And I want to make sure everybody understands that it's very important not to try any of this on your own. So I did go to my doctor, but before I did that, I went to my family. My family is they are the people that live with me. They are the people who take the brunt of when I'm not well. So I told my husband that this is something I wanted to try. And he said he supported that. And I said, well, what I need from you, because I need this, is I may not be aware of anything changing within me. I need you to tell me. I need you to just be open with me and just tell me if something's happening that you're uncomfortable with, or that you feel like maybe I am going down that path again. And so he agreed. We sat the children down and we told them, you know, mommy's going to go off these medications. We need you to let us know. You don't have to talk. If you're scared of me, which they are, unfortunately, at the time, because of the way they grew up, they were very scared of me. If you're scared to talk to me, go tell daddy. Mommy's not acting right. We need to maybe do something. So they were involved. I needed them to be involved because I was not sure how aware I would be if these episodes were coming on. And we went to the doctor, explained what was going on and what I wanted to try. And she was on board. Again, another system doctor who was on board with this, you know, randomly picked. I'm in a new place. I don't know anyone. This doctor, that's the one I'm going to. And she was on board with it. She said, if you don't feel like you need to be on these medications, then let's titrate you off of them. And so we did. I don't know how many people she's ever actually titrated off of medications before, but we made a plan, and it took several months. I can't remember how many months, but it took several months to titrate off. And it's not a pleasant experience because, like I said, I didn't know how to sleep. So I had to relearn how to sleep. I didn't know how to function during the day. I slept all the time. So I actually made a rule. I'm a huge rule follower. I made a rule, and my rule was no naps. No naps. You're not allowed to take naps. So I had to learn to stay awake all day and be functional all day. So and all of a sudden I have all this energy. So that's when I start exercising. That's when I find yoga and I start practicing yoga. I was just doing little like lightweight training apps. Like, I didn't know a thing about weight training whatsoever. So I was just picking up things here and there. And of course, now instead of just taking the dog around our little apartment complex, I'm going to the park, and we're walking 4 to 6 miles every day, rain, shine, you know, whatever the weather, we were out there, unless it was super, super windy. It's very windy here. So unless it was super, super windy, we were out there walking. It bothers the dog's ears really bad. So we don't go walking in the strong winds. So that's because I wanted to get off the medication and I had to relearn all of this stuff. That's when I started incorporating exercise again back into my life. So that was in 2019. So I was, you know, a year and a half, 2 years into my NSNG journey at that time.
Robyn, I often talk about experimentation on ourselves, and you're a big believer in that, clearly, because of what you've done, even more so than me. I mean, I thought I was experimenting by just, you know, cutting down on oxalates that I just learned about, and then adding animal products in because I thought the vegan diet was the most healthy in the world. So I experimented to get my way back to health. One of the most interesting things, folks, you're going to listen to this one. Robyn did a big experiment on herself with Dr. Tro, and that was the sweet potato experiment. And it's so interesting because you really were your own N of one with Dr. Tro there, adding these carbohydrates back in, and then you notice the symptoms start to come back. So please, I'll shut up now and let you speak.
You told the story. It's okay. I don't have to go into it. No, just so like you said, I randomly found a doctor that was okay with what was going on. But I was having some strange symptoms. So I'm going to get to the sweet potato story, but it starts here. I was starting having all these really odd symptoms. I was having heart palpitation, cold all the time, getting hot flashes, just wasn't menopausal. It was different. And I started reading about thyroid conditions. I found out my mom had her thyroid removed, and I was like, maybe I have a thyroid problem. So I tried to find a doctor in the area that would help me with my thyroid. And of course, I'm learning that because I dive into research. I think I've read in the past 6 years 3 novels. Everything else has been some sort of book about my health. So I was reading all these books about thyroid conditions, and I realized that the doctor that I had originally gone to that was very helpful titrating me off of the medication was only testing my TSH and saying I was fine and would not test anything else. So I was like, I'm going to go find another doctor. I went through 2 other doctors to the point where, one doctor actually looked at me. I did convince her to take a full panel of thyroid, which I was able to read because of the research I was doing, and say, I have Hashimoto's, that she read and said, you're going to be fine. We're not going to do anything. We're not going to treat this until you get a nodule, and then we'll just remove your thyroid. That's what she said to me. And that was the last time I went into that office. And that's when I was like, okay, I have a problem. I can see it. I can see it in my blood work, but I'm not a doctor. So I need to find a doctor who will read this and help me with this process with this. And I keep finding people that I'm firing, basically, because everyone's in the system, and this is just not how we treat thyroid conditions. We look at the TSH only. It's a pituitary hormone, it is not a thyroid hormone. And we just wait until it's time to remove the thyroid. That's all we do. That's what everybody does. We're not doing anything about it. So I said to my husband, I'm like, I know I don't want to be a burden. However, I think I need to see Dr. Tro. I know that he will know. He will at least understand how I eat and be accepting of that choice and not give me a bunch of crap for eating meat all the time. So at least I could talk to him. He looked at the same blood work numbers. He did draw others, but he looked at the ones that I had given him and was like, you have Hashimoto's. I was like, thank you. Now what do we do about it? Because I want to keep my thyroid as long as possible. I know that my mom had hers removed, and coincidentally, in that time period, my dad had his removed. Right. So I know I'm like pretty susceptible to a thyroid condition. I need to go get this. My goal is to treat it so that I don't ever have to have it removed. If that's possible, I'm not sure, but that's where we are now. So I see Dr. Tro for that reason. Well, he does a litany of blood work. If you ever have the opportunity to have Dr. Tro as your doctor, you will have the people at the lab look at you like, you're not leaving here with any blood in your body. They're going to take it all. So he does all this blood work. And what we find out is that my LDL cholesterol has shot up. Well, I must say this is still, we're still in the 2019. Dave Feldman's research is out there where people are talking about it. We know that at this time, he knows that people who are eating low carb, who are very lean, can sometimes have high cholesterol. But he's a very well-trained medical doctor, and his training says you need to go on a statin. So he even says that. He's like, my training says you need to go on a statin, but I bet you're going to tell me no. And I said, yeah, I'm going to tell you no. He goes, okay, that's fine. You told me no. We need to come up with a solution, because I, as a doctor, don't feel comfortable with you having these numbers this high. At some point, my numbers were like greater than whatever the top number is, like through the roof high. So let's figure this out. If going low carb will raise your LDL numbers, then wouldn't it be safe to say that adding carbohydrate back in will lower those numbers, which is a lot of what Dave's initial research was. So I said, yeah, sure. So now listen, we are in no man's land here. We don't know, we don't know if this is going to work. He said, so we're going to do some tests. So we did a genetic test to make sure I wasn't, this is a hard word familial hypocholesterolemia, right? I think I got it out.
Well
So
done. Well done.
we did that. I do not have that, as so it's not genetic. And we did a CAC. So I had my coronary artery scanned, and it's a 0. So he's like, I feel comfortable because of these two things to try a little experiment. And I'm all for it, because I really desire to give back to the community. So if that means I get to be part of an experiment, then I'm all for it. Let's do it. So let's go. So he's like, you have choices. We're going to add carbohydrate back into your diet. At this point, I'm like super low carb. I did do carnivore, like strict carnivore, for several months. I started bringing things back in, but at this time I was still in that pretty strict phase. He said, so we're going to bring some carbohydrate back in. You can have white rice. You can have oatmeal, plain oatmeal. And I'm like, oatmeal? That's only for cookies. I don't want oatmeal. Or you can have a sweet potato. So I said, I will have a sweet potato. So this starts my the 9-month-long experiment with the sweet potato. What I needed to do was to eat 1 sweet potato a day without anything else, no fat with it. So, you want to load it up with butter? No, just a sweet potato, 1 sweet potato a day. And then I think it was 2 months later, we did, blood work to see how it was working. And those numbers were going down. So we were getting the results that we wanted. However, I was having these weird thoughts in my brain. One of my biggest symptoms is my first thought in the morning is, I can't wait to go back to sleep. And I was starting to have that thought. So I told Tro this. And so, being the doctor that he is, he said, well, we need to match the dose to the person. So maybe 1 sweet potato is too much. We went from 1 full sweet potato a day to a half a sweet potato a day. And I believe I did that for about 3 months. And we took the blood work and everything was still trending down. So he was pleased with that. But I had stopped waking up and practicing yoga in the morning, and I'm not getting on my rower anymore, and I'm not doing the things that I usually do. And I tell him all of this, and my husband's actually, this has rung the alarm for my husband, who is like, you're angrier than you usually are. Something's going on, and the big change here is you're eating a sweet potato. So I tell Tro, it really feels like these depressive symptoms are coming back. So he says, well, let's cut it down to just, like a quarter of a sweet potato a day. Because again, at the time, we didn't have this research that just came out a couple of days ago. We are literally in no man's land. We don't know if this high LDL number is something I need to be concerned about or not. So we start cutting it down, and it turns out that even that was too much. I was not getting out of bed. I was the same old habit of getting the kids off to school and then coming back and laying down and going to sleep. That was happening again. Angry, the yelling started again. Nothing can make me happy. The children are walking on eggshells around me. It's just not safe to be in the house together anymore. And ultimately what happened, I actually had gotten COVID, and I was like in bed and I was sick. And what happened before I actually had symptoms, the cold symptoms from COVID, was I had a huge autoimmune flare. So that's actually what kind of knocked me out. So that put me in bed. And then all I was doing was like drinking hot tea and eating a sweet potato. And it was like, why am I still eating this sweet potato? I'm miserable. And my husband, who was bringing me my food because I was sequestered in the bedroom, said, I'm not making you your sweet potato anymore. Here's some broth. And I just started basically rehabbing off of the sweet potato. And I had to dig myself out of that. That was November, I think. And no, it was October. It was in October that I was sick. And it was probably February before I finally had enough energy to will myself to do the things that I used to do. And then I'd make a calendar and just start. Yoga is written down and I'd check it off. And lift weights is written down and I check it off. Get on your rower is written down and I check it off. And because I had to basically stay on top of myself. So getting back into the NSNG carnivore way of eating, eliminating the sweet potato completely. And then in February, I'm finally able to push myself to do the things that I need to do. And then it all become a habit again. And then everything starts clearing up and feeling better again. And so that was my experiment. We got the numbers to do what they needed to do, but what's the point of having these beautiful numbers on a piece of paper that I don't know what it even means really, when I'm severely depressed and my quality of life is just poor, and there's just no point to that.
So interesting, Robyn. And, the investigative person that I am now, just like you, my brain's going overtime specifically because I've talked to people like Sally Norton and Monique Attinger, and the fact that sweet potatoes are so high in oxalate as well, which can be a neurotoxin for folks too. Again, this journey is just incredible, and so appreciative of you sharing it. Robyn, as most listeners now that may have, and I talk about this saying, putting the pieces of their own health puzzle together, go, okay, I've been diagnosed with depression or another mental illness, and Robyn's giving me hope here. Robyn, what is your, just out of interest, and I never ascribe or prescribe to folks that one size fits all in terms of diet, because it is very unique to us as individuals. We're all individualistic, and what works for one person may not work for another. You've described your current diet as meat with jewelry. Is it still like that? Please tell the listeners what you're eating right now, if you wouldn't mind.
Well, I do want to go back to your point with Sally Norton, is that at the time I did not know about the oxalate thing. So now I am curious, but we'll never know because I am not doing the sweet potato experiment again. How much of that was attributed to oxalate? Because yeah, sweet potato is a high oxalate food, and that's not a path I'm going to go down again. So the world will never know, but there's definitely a possibility that it was not just the carbohydrate addition, but it's also the addition of the oxalate. And so I don't want to discount that fact. That could very much be part of the case here. But I learned a lot about myself, and what I learned is that it's not an option, and I keep myself very low carb. So right now I'm essentially, it's easier to say that I'm carnivore. The things that I eat that aren't are avocado. Every once in a while I'll have some berries, especially in a hot Texas summer, I'll have some frozen berries. And I'll have some onion. And every once in a while I'll eat tomato like in a sauce, because sometimes I just want things stuck together with a sauce. That's just it. And that's it. That's the only things that I eat that aren't a meat product of some sort. So,
And Robyn, what would you say your percentage in terms of fats are? Are you eating more higher fat, moderate, low? How are you doing it?
that's an interesting question. So what sets NSNG apart, I think, from when we talk about other ketogenic type of diets, is that NSNG, you are not required at any time to do any tracking of any sort. If you simply, and I say simply, this is how I describe it. If you simply cut out sugar, and that's all sugar substitutes, and if you simply cut out all grains, you're going to see results in your health and in your physical body, no matter what. So you don't have to track, which works out well for me because I don't want to track. I think if I started tracking, that would be like, I would just be looking at charts and graphs all the time. And I think that's more of a distraction. So I have tracked experimentally for very short periods of time, but is not something that I do regularly. Right now I am, because of my training regime, I am trying to prioritize protein a lot more, but I do add, for my brain health, I add coconut oil to my coffee when I drink my coffee. Oh, I guess that's not a meat product, but yeah, I drink coffee. So one cup a day. Oh, just 1 cup. So there's some people like it's bothersome to me that we have this community that is a very wide range of people who are having success, and that the people that are like, I only eat beef and water, are yelling at the people who are finding success that are not. They're eating other things. Like, we can all be a unified group for health, and we can all fit on this range, this dietary range, and all have the success that we need, and adjust as needed as we progress through our own personal journey. And I'm not going to compare myself to you. You don't need to compare yourself to me, and everybody can be happy with what they do for themselves. That's where I am with it. So I don't really track. And it's never been important to me to track, but I am trying to prioritize my protein. But I do also, if it's a ribeye, I eat the whole thing. There's not that fat cut off and pushed off to the side. No, that's the yummy, delicious part. I'm eating that too. So whatever the natural fat to protein ratio is on a steak, that's what I'm consuming.
We are so aligned in our thought process. Robyn, I do not track. I have never tracked. I get asked all the time, do I weigh my food? No, I do not. If there's fat on the piece of meat, I'm eating it all. You better believe it, because I starved myself of proper nutrition for so many years. And moreover, like you said, I have 1 cup of coffee a day. It seems to be working okay for me. I'm fine with it. I enjoy it. It's part of my routine. I put some of the equipped protein powder in there and blend it up. So it's another way for me to get a little extra protein, prioritizing it, as you said. But more importantly, I left that dogma behind in my past dietary choices. And there's not a lot of room for dogma in diet, as I often talk about, because, like we were just telling, and you experimented on yourself with the sweet potato, found out no go moving forward with that one.
Because I interact with a lot of people on the internet within the community, and I never had that problem because, like I said, I was blissfully unaware that I was overweight. So I never did the diet train. That was just not part of I was too busy being half dead in a corner somewhere. So, but I see so many people who did do all of the diet things and had to have the rules and had to have all of these things that flock towards tracking, and that ends up becoming a distraction. And I try to pull them out of it. Like, when I talk to them and interact with them, it's like, it doesn't have to be that way. You can allow yourself the freedom to just eat, knowing what your guidelines are, knowing that I only eat these 5 items, and okay, then just eat those 5 items, and you're going to be fine. You don't have to. I've never pricked my finger for a ketone. I've never had the thing. I'm going to assume, because for the past 6 years, I've been NSNG with a very heavy leaning on carnivore. Whenever I cheat carnivore, it's always NSNG. So I still am always within those guidelines. I'm going to assume I'm in ketosis. My brain is healthier now. I'm going to assume I'm in ketosis. I don't need to check that. And I want people to understand that they don't, because it is for so many people, it becomes a crutch and it becomes a distraction. Stepping on the scale 5, 6, 7, 8 times a day. Like, I gained a pound in this hour. Like, it's okay. If you're trending downwards, you're going to be fine. It's not. Back up and see the bigger picture. It's not these little tiny dots on a piece of paper. It's your life. Like, that's what's important, is your life. How's your quality of life?
Robyn, as we begin to wind down in our conversation, I wanted to highlight something, because, as I mentioned earlier, we both really have come full circle here at talking today over Zoom, but still connecting and sharing with our audience. You have recently started your own podcast, and I want you to share with the audience what it's about and what are you going to be doing for your social media presence there.
Okay, so I'm teaming up with a good friend of mine. His name is Scott King, and if you're in the NSNG world, then you know who Scott King is. He's lost over 300 pounds. He's very open about his story. If you ask Vinnie, he's lost like 800 pounds, but he's lost an amazing amount of weight and maintained that. He's also gone from couch potato to he's a triathlete, and he's now training for an Ironman, an individual Ironman. He competed in a bike portion of a Ironman before, but he's going to do an individual. So he's an amazing story, and he and I really enjoy hearing other people's stories. We really, for ourselves, it gives us a lot of inspiration, but we also know how helpful it is to other people to hear stories. I used to, for a very brief time, I had a thing on Clubhouse where and I would invite a guest in to tell their story, and it was okay, but I didn't like the platform, so we ended that. And also, Vinnie used to have a Saturday show, which was dedicated to having somebody who was NSNG come on and tell their story. He just wanted to hear from the people, but he changed his format, so he no longer has that show. So we both felt like those stories are still out there and need to be heard. So we started just kind of talking back and forth about bringing it back. And so we are, and it's called Less of Me Success Stories. Scott's handle is Less of Me with NSNG. So that's where the Less of Me came from. So it's Less of Me Success Stories. It's at Less of Me Stories on YouTube. So that's all we're going to do is YouTube. And we're both a little crazy. We're going to do it live, because we're both not, neither of us know what we're doing. So we just said, why don't we do it the hardest way possible? And so that's what we're going to do. We're doing it live on YouTube at 7:00 Central Time. So that's Chicago, Dallas time on YouTube on Thursdays. So right now, first guest is Scott, second guest is me. We have some people lined up for our future. Right now, the format is going to be, we just want you to share your story. And then since it's live, we're going to have the chat open. If anybody wants to ask any questions, they're welcome to ask questions in the chat, and we'll bring them up. This was basically the format we did with the Clubhouse, which was really incredible, in that, people who had similar stories who were listening could ask the question and hear how our guest tackled that. So we wanted to make sure that was still part. That's why we wanted to do it live. We wanted to make sure that was still part of the process, where there was interaction with the listeners, because somebody could be brand new that's just catching up, just catching our episode and be like, I have that same thing happen to me. Let me ask. So I'm hoping that we do get the interaction with the people. So please follow us on YouTube. So our only thing that is specific to that show, the Less of Me success stories, is the YouTube. Otherwise, you have to follow me or Scott. We're on the socials. He's Scott King. You'll see him. And then I'm Robyn R. Dobbins on Instagram, Facebook, and X. I haven't delved into any other socials because I'm scared. But it's a place to start. We're super excited. So we just launched it on Thursday. And before I got on, he texted me. He's like, we have 28 followers. And you know what? That's amazing. And I'm like, I didn't think anybody would know we even existed. So we have 28, but, we'll celebrate 30 and we'll celebrate as we go. But, if we can help 28 people, then it's worth the effort.
I will make sure to put all your social handles in the show notes, Robyn, as well as the YouTube channel. So folks, make sure that you tune in, or if you don't get to tune in, it will obviously be up on YouTube afterwards for you to catch it afterwards. And I'm with you, Robyn. I've got enough. I'm not going to be a TikToker. I'm not ticking anything. I'm sticking to my Twitter is crazy enough. Instagram's a little bit softer and kinder. Twitter, you enter into the fire in that space, but it's good. And then I'm on YouTube as well. So folks know that. Robyn, before we end out, I just wonder if you could, the listeners have heard your incredible testimony, and they are wondering, if they haven't started already, how can they begin? How do they start? Where do they start? NSNG, there's basically so much out there now that has sugar and grains in it. How did you even wrap your mind around what you were going to put in your mouth? with eliminating that stuff. So please give them some tips before you go, if you could.
I think that goes back to where we started in the fact that I remember people cooking. You got to cook. You got to get yourself back into the kitchen. I know sometimes that seems really overwhelming, but when you put your hands on it and you create the dish, it's so much more meaningful. You can go out there and navigate the world. If you like to eat burgers every single day, then you can go out there and do that. But, learning to cook, we're not connected with food. We're not hunting our food. We're, for the most part, we just go to the grocery store and pick something up. So our only connection that we have left is to be in the kitchen cooking our food. And I got to say, I'm going to give her a plug. In our NSNG community, we have the lovely Anna Vocino, who has written 2 great cookbooks, Eat Happy and Eat Happy 2. And she's also working on an Italian, low-carb Italian. Look, everything I cooked came out of her cookbooks. She's got a website. She has free recipes all over her website. If you want an easy meal that is nutritious and within NSNG guidelines, go to her website, annavocino.com, and you will be set. That's how we got to where we are in our dietary goals. My husband and myself was just eating her recipes. And it is work to do it, but it's so worth it. There's really just no other way. It's so worth it to prepare the foods for yourself.
And I know at one point, Robyn, you used to have the hashtag reading labels with Robyn.
I did.
Yes. And do you think you'll do any more of that? And then just touching on that again, as we finish off, but it's very important that you pay attention that if you're buying something that's not a whole food, that you do read the ingredients. We've talked about seed oils. We've talked about all that stuff, but yeah.
Reading labels with Robyn, the hashtag is only inside of the NSNG private Facebook group. And I was very passionate about it. It's a very long post with photos about how to read labels, because especially beginners, they're trying to navigate the grocery store. And when I started, the keto craze hadn't really happened yet. So that wasn't an issue. I wasn't picking up something that said keto, but people are getting fooled by this. And I'm telling you, if it says keto on it, just put it back. It's not, there's no regulation on it. They can write the word keto. A lot of times it's actually just the brand name is keto. It doesn't have anything to do with the recipe or the ingredients. It's just a brand name, and you're being fooled. So I do take reading labels seriously. I have been asked to bring reading labels with Robyn out into the other socials, and I haven't done it. One, reading labels with Robyn is really long, so I need to rename it. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is that I just dove into all these other projects and I just never brought it back out. But it may reappear, because it is, just reading a heavy whipping cream. It's skim milk, and then they put 5 different gums in it to make it thick. Well, don't eat that. It's not good for you. Just don't eat it. And people don't know that. They just see heavy whipping cream on the front. Never read the front. Always read the back. Always read the ingredient list. There's nothing factual about nutrition facts. Always read the ingredient list.
Wise advice, Robyn. Robyn Dobbins, what an absolute honor and a privilege and pleasure it has been to reconnect with you. Your story is an incredible one, and I want to thank you for taking the time out to share with our listeners today, and wish you and your family the very best of the upcoming holidays and the new year. Thank you for coming on and taking the time out to chat with me.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
And that's a wrap on this episode of Carnivorist Chats. If you've made it this far, I want to say thank you for listening, and also thank you in advance for liking, subscribing, or sharing this episode. Thanks again to Equip Foods, Carnivore Snacks, and the Carnivore Bar. Don't forget to check the link in the show notes to get a discount on their products. Until the next time, be well.